14 months, 63 episodes, every single week, writing them, recording them, editing them, promoting them, sitting with Holly in my apartment, talking into a microphone about dating, relationships, human behavior, and all sorts of strange things people do to each other. And for most of that time, almost nobody knew who I was. People listened. A lot told me they binged the entire catalog. Many reached out to tell me that an episode changed how they viewed a relationship or helped them understand something they'd been struggling with. But there was a certain distance to it all. Then, a few weeks ago, I did something different. I turned on a camera. Same topics, same opinions, same stories, same voice. The only difference was that people could see me saying the words. And almost immediately, everything changed. Comments and direct messages started showing up. People started reacting to specific moments. A childhood friend I hadn't heard from in decades reached out after his sister told him about it. And suddenly I wasn't just some name from the past anymore. I was a real person again. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this has almost nothing to do with podcasting. I think it explains something interesting about modern dating. What happened to this show is exactly what's happening on dating apps every day. A voice tells you what someone thinks. A face tells you who they are. Here's something I didn't fully understand until recently. When you only hear someone, your brain automatically fills in the blanks. You create an image, you build a version of them, you imagine what they look like, how they move, how they carry themselves, how they react when they're excited, frustrated, nervous, or confident. You construct an entire person without all the information. Sometimes you're surprisingly accurate, and sometimes you're wildly wrong. But either way, the person you imagine is partially your creation. The moment you can actually see them, everything changes. You see the expression underneath the joke, the pause before a difficult point, and whether the confidence sounds the same as it looks. You notice things that have nothing to do with attractiveness and everything to do with presence. Presence is a strange thing. Everybody knows it exists, but nobody can completely explain it. You've met people who are objectively attractive but leave you completely cold. You've also met people who aren't the most attractive person in the room but somehow become the only person you notice. That's presence, and it's almost impossible to communicate through static imagery. I've spent 30 years in broadcasting. I understand the technical differences between radio and television, but I didn't understand how dramatic the emotional difference could be until I watched it happen to my own audience. For 14 months, people were hearing my thoughts. Then they started seeing me, and the connection changed almost overnight. People were reacting to the exact same person they had been listening to all along. The only thing that changed was that they could finally see me. And once I noticed that, I started to think about dating and how dating apps are built almost entirely around static imagery. Photos, a short bio, a few prompts, a list of interests. I mean, that's basically it. And somehow we're expecting all of that to accurately represent a living, breathing human being. It's actually kind of ridiculous when you think about it. Imagine meeting your friends that way. Imagine trying to decide whether you wanted to be friends with someone based on 6 photos and 3 written prompts. You'd never do it. And that's exactly what we're asking people to do when it comes to dating. And then we wonder why the process feels shallow, why the chemistry disappears after the first conversation, and why somebody who looked perfect on paper turns out to generate absolutely no chemistry whatsoever. The answer is that attraction doesn't happen on paper, it happens in presence. Every once in a while, on Bumble, I'll come across a profile with a short video clip. It's nothing elaborate or professionally produced. It's usually just someone talking, laughing, walking, or doing something completely ordinary. And in 10 seconds, I learn more than I did from 10 photographs. I hear their voice, I see how they move and notice their energy. I get a sense of whether they seem warm, playful, guarded, anxious, confident, sarcastic, serious, or curious. I experience a tiny glimpse into what being around them might feel like. And that's the thing photographs struggle to communicate. Photos are selections. Everybody chooses their best angle, lighting, expression, and moment. Everybody does it. But a photo is still a frozen performance, a single frame pulled from a much larger reality. And there's a limit to how much information a frozen image can provide. The problem is that attraction isn't really about appearance. Appearance gets attention, presence creates attraction. That's why you've probably matched with people whose photos look fantastic and then felt absolutely nothing after a conversation. The chemistry suggested by the images didn't survive contact with the actual person. That's where so much disappointment on dating apps comes from, the gap between the image and the experience. People aren't lying or misrepresenting themselves. It's that photos are structurally incapable of showing the thing that we're really trying to evaluate. That's presence. Video doesn't solve that completely. Nothing does. You still need to meet somebody and have an actual interaction. But with video, you'll find out sooner whether somebody's energy matches the image and personality matches the profile, or whether there's anything worth moving forward with. One of the biggest problems in dating is inefficiency. People waste months talking to people who were never going to be a fit in the first place, or weeks building expectations around carefully selected photos and painstakingly written bios. Then they meet, and the reality immediately answers the question that could have been answered much earlier. What happened with this podcast was essentially the same thing. For 14 months, people had information about me. Then they got presence, and presence changed everything. The messages weren't because of better editing or different format. People were responding to the person, a human being. And I think that's something we're all striving for right now. We're drowning in information. Everybody knows everybody's hobbies, politics, favorite television shows, travel destinations, and personality types. We've never had more information about each other, and yet at the same time, we've never felt more disconnected. Maybe that's because information isn't what creates connection. Presence creates connection. Presence is what makes somebody memorable and what makes you feel like you've truly met somebody instead of merely collecting data about them. And that's why I think video matters, because it reveals something photographs can't. The person underneath the profile and carefully put together version of themselves. The actual human being. And that's ultimately what we're all trying to find anyway. The strange thing is I spent 14 months proving this without realizing it. For 14 months, people heard my thoughts, then they saw my face, and suddenly they weren't connecting with the content anymore, they were connecting with the person making it. And that's the thing that changed. And I think the exact same thing can happen in dating. The moment somebody stops being a profile and becomes a person, everything changes. The moment somebody starts becoming presence, attraction becomes possible. Attraction doesn't happen when you learn about someone. It happens when you experience them, even if it's for 30 seconds.